So I'm going to carry on now with some texturing on a piece that I had started a while ago that is, I think, from cedar, and it's warped a bit on once it's been drying. It's a couple of mil thick, 3 mil thick. So I'm going to try some external texturing, not too thick, not too deep rather, otherwise there won't be anything left of it. So I'm probably going to use the Dremel, I think. Well, it's not actually a Dremel, it's actually an Axminster AMT, which I hang on a hook and bendy cord thing. So I've got some Saburr ball and a teardrop version, which I shall try to use in different ways. Focus, come on, focus. First off, a series of indents around the edge at moderately regular intervals using a spherical one. And then another layer of slightly elongated grooves below the first one. Then I didn't really like where that was going, so I'm scuffing them up with the ball and softening those down a bit. And then just trying that again, but with the lathe running, just give a bit of a scuffing action. And then with the lathe running, do some demarcation lines. Not so easy because it's no longer uniform, so the ball is juddering. So I'm not too sure that was very effective. Would have been better if it was actually not warped. And now putting some more detail in, but this time trying the teardrop one. And then a bit more in one of the lines lower down. Then time to change the bit again, and this time going for a sort of carbide edged cutting wheel to do some slices. And then that was quite effective, so I'm going to do some more now over the rest of the body, just skittering it around at random and in different directions. And then just using the same wheel here to define the gap between the various textures, because as it's not completely uniform any longer because it's oval, I can't really get it back on the lathe to turn it with a spindle gouge. So I've now got a dentist burr out and I'm going to start piercing the body. But first, so I can get some of the holes in a uniform location, I'm using the indexing wheel to mark the body up so I know where to drill.
And then I want to create some little V-shaped holes in the top. So I've got to start drilling extra holes now. So I've got a little set of 3 that I can then join up with the side of the carbide cutter. Quite some time later, I'd managed to do all the V's and then swapped over to a fine carbide dust burr just to tidy up the holes and remove any raggedy bits. None of them are uniform, it's not expected to be that way. It's all supposed to be slightly random. So I'm now going to get the electric power carving chisel out and using a V-groove tool go down the lines that I've drawn from the indexing and make them into a detailed line from the joining the holes up down to the bottom. And then another line around the middle, just as another point of definition using the carbide grinding wheel. And another line defining it at the bottom as well. And then another tool, a carbide one that's a cone that's slightly wider at the top than it is at the bottom. I just want to make a bit more detail at the base. And I think I want to create some more definition at the top, so I think I'm going to take out some of the material around those little heart-shaped V notches and try to create some sort of dental work, some exposed teeth shapes. So I'm just going to go and do some more little scallops, define the scallops at the edge. Instead of being a little circular dent, I'm now going to make them so it's slightly pie crusty. So time to defuzz it all with one of these braiding wheels that's got some sort of carbide in the tips. Then a quick sand up on the inside through the grits, and also a bit of light duty sanding on the outside, trying to avoid taking out the detail that I've just carved in there. Then a final bit of cleaning up of the holes. So I'm going to move on to some colouring now, but before I do that I want to burn it off with the blowtorch so that I can get some multi sort of coloured effects when I put the dyes and paints on. To be careful to make sure it doesn't catch on fire, and it's always good to have some water in a spray bottle next to you. A quick squirt of water every now and again does control it from smouldering. Right, ready to do some colouring. Before I do that, I've allowed the spray water to dry off, and then a few coats of pre-thinned cellulose sanding sealer. It's very dry, this wood, both on the inside and the outside, so that any of the spray from the colouring on the outside doesn't stain the inside if I don't want it to be. Right, some chestnut blue spirit stain applied with a cloth to start with. I decided I liked the colour, but I needed to get a bit more into the base of the texturing. So I used the puffer airbrush thing to actually spray the inside and the outside. I'm now using an intrinsic blue colour to puff some splatters of blue on top of the chestnut stain. I like to put colour on and then gently rub it off again so that you can control where it goes. The intrinsic colour doesn't go off as quickly as a spirit stain, so you've got the opportunity to sort of rub it and blend it a bit more, and you can always reactivate it with a little spritz of water as well. So I've let that dry off and now going to start putting some further layers of colour on, just a sort of semi-dry brush with some of the Dura-Grit interference colours. Again, put it on, rub it off a bit, put it on, rub it off a bit so that it goes on very lightly. And some more blending with a sort of flicking action with a pretty dry brush just to raise the highlights. And there's always room for some more colours, so this is the Dura-Grit red to just add a bit of a blush. They're interference paints, so they go on as a milky colour and they only show through because they're on a slightly darker background. So they need to go on very lightly just to highlight some parts and leave other parts unhighlighted, just a little at a time. Again, use a dry brush technique and then rub on and rub off with a cloth just to keep it under control. Well, I had got the Inka Gold out, so I thought, well, I better use it because it's sort of there. So using that, of course, let the other stuff dry off. And using that now just to, again, highlight certain parts so that they just sparkle a little bit. And it dries pretty quickly, but I wanted to, again, just buff a bit back using a bit of nyeweed and a bit of cloth just to sort of bring the shine up. And then 4 coats of acrylic gloss lacquer. Use the heat gun in between each layer to warm it gently to dry it off. So there we have it, a bit of fun with some texturing and some colouring, and it's made a quite simple little almost scrap piece of cedar into something a bit of fun.